At this time, it is past 7 o'clock, and so I'd like to run on time. So I want to call the meeting to order and start with introductions. I'm Jamie Johnson, Board President for the Hudson School District, and we have our Vice President, Bruce Hanson, way over there in the end. Carrie Whitaker is our clerk. Carrie, you want to raise your hand so people know who you are? All right. Then Lynn Robson is our treasurer. Lynn is our senior member of the board in her 9th year on the board. Sandy Gerke is in her 2nd term. And Rob Brown and Sue Katas, who are in their 1st term. All right. We have then our superintendent, Dr. Nick Olette, Financial Services Director, Tim Erickson. They let him sit up here this year. That's good. And parliamentarian is Shana Lewis of the law firm of Strang, Pattison, Renning, Lewis, and Lacey. And at this time, I will turn it over to Attorney Lewis as our parliamentarian.
Thank you, Jamie. Tonight's annual meeting is held pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 120.08. The statute requires the Hudson School District, like all common school districts, to hold an annual meeting to allow the district's electors to take action regarding special powers reserved to them as a body by the Wisconsin statutes. For purposes of the annual meeting, electors are those residents of the district who are 18 years of age or older. The next order of business on the agenda is to elect a chairperson. Do we have a nomination for a chairperson for tonight's meeting?
I nominate Jamie Johnson to be the chairperson for the annual meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, Jamie, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Okay. And I just noticed that one of the things we were promised were these little pink booklets for each of the board members. I don't know if Tim Miner is here, if we have those. Otherwise, we could share a copy and move it up and down the row here. But do we have it electronically?
The pink copy is mine, actually. That you have white copies. And,
all right, we'll get
yes,
those.
you have it electronically, but yes, we will give you the hard copies.
Could they go print some pink cover copies, please? Or
it's a calming color.
All right. So with the next agenda item for our annual meeting here is then school district highlights. I turn it over to Dr. Nick Olette.
All right, this is a fun part for me, a fun part of the year, a fun part of the meeting as we work through the highlights for the year. Had an opportunity to present these highlights on a couple different occasions already so far this year. We're able to present them to the Chamber of Commerce and our new teachers, and then also to our entire district staff 2 weeks ago at our back to school meeting. Maybe. Yeah, I'm on. If you just want to click the next slide. All right, perfect. We talked a little bit about the Raider Way and how we do business here in the Hudson schools, and we've spent a lot of time with our branding, and branding's more than just logos on a shirt or freshened uniforms or paint on walls. It's really about the way we act and the way we interact with people. And we want, as part of the Raider Way, we want this to be a welcoming environment. We want to make sure that we're providing that respectful, safe environment for our kids so that they can learn, and that everybody feels like they are engaged in a very welcoming environment. You want to go next slide, Tim? Also, kind of the second principle of the Raider Way is really looking at student-centered. And that's everything that we do. We try to focus on making our decisions around kids, from our decisions on how we want to allocate resources to how we do scheduling to how we staff things. All of these things we try to focus on what we think is best for kids so that we can get each and every child to reach his or her fullest potential. In transforming, again, we want everyone's experience that interacts with the Hudson School District that's part of the Raider family to have a transforming experience. We want to make sure that we are maximizing opportunities for learning for our kids, and we want to make sure that we're always striving to do better. You saw that tonight earlier with our district goals. Although it would have been easy to rest on just saying we have a really busy year coming up with construction projects, that's not good enough. We want to continue to push the district in a lot of different directions as far as getting the goals accomplished and not just resting on that. And then lastly, the culture of excellence, and it kind of goes back to what I said earlier with making decisions based on kids' best interest, and also developing high-quality learning spaces, high-quality educational programs, and really just trying to push the envelope in being that world-class school. We have, as you'll see coming up in a lot of the accomplishments that I will talk about, we have some wonderful things that are going on in the district, especially as it pertains to our kids and what they're doing and what our staff is doing with our kids. But in the end, we do strive for this culture of excellence and excellence in everything we do. If you want to go to the next slide, Tim. So district achievements, this has really been a great year. 15-16 has been a really great year. We were named to the National Board AP Honor Roll for the 5th time out of 6 years. I think there's only a handful of high schools in the state of Wisconsin that have achieved that honor. We were considered one of Washington Post's most challenging high schools in the country. We had 172 AP student scholars, and you saw that in the earlier meeting when Sandy had the list of names and what those students were accomplishing. Additional district achievements, we were listed for a 5th time as being a best community for music. I talked about this at the Chamber of Commerce new teacher luncheon, and that has more to do than just with the district, but it has to do with the way the community has embraced music and music education, and it's been a great partnership here in the Hudson School District. EP Rock Elementary School was designated last year as a special education academic achievement. There was a group of teachers that were selected to go down and work on a state task force to try to push that model and what we're doing and the success we're having at EP Rock and giving more people access to that. Holton Elementary was recognized as a Title I school of recognition, and so a great honor for Holton as well. Some of the things that are coming up, and we talked about this again in our previous meeting, but as part of the annual meeting, we do have a groundbreaking coming up for our middle school construction project. The middle school construction project is the result of a referendum passing on April 5th. That project is just under $9 million. It's a very important project. It gives us the much needed breathing room that we need at the middle school. It adds 12 additional classrooms and in a gymnasium. It allows us to also remodel one of the current houses that's being used for special education only and disperse our special education services throughout the building in a more equitable model. It also allows us then to get 3 houses, one at each grade level by doing that. Really does some great things for us. We are in the process, as I said earlier, of breaking ground here in the next month with even the mobilization happening in the next few weeks, so where you'll start to see construction, fencing, job trailers, things along those lines. So really an exciting time for the project. What you see on the screen is a rendering of what that project could potentially look like when it's all completed. We would anticipate by the October 18th meeting that we'll have some virtual reality images of that building. You'll be able to get inside, especially the new resource areas and things, and put on Google glasses and be able to virtually tour that building, and it'll be something that'll be quite neat. Next slide, please. The high school project is another big project that we have coming up this year. The high school construction project, again, is a result of a referendum passage on April 5th. The combined total dollar amount at the high school site is right around $85 million. That's between renovation and additions to the high school and a new multi-purpose athletic stadium, and then renovation of the space that we're currently sitting in as well. That project is slated to break ground in April of 2017 or spring of 2017 with an estimated completion date of about August of 2019. One thing I failed to mention on the previous slide is the middle school. We anticipate that the middle school would be completed and ready for our students to occupy by this time next year. So that space will go very quick. We're currently in the site design process. We've spent a lot of time talking about the site site work and making sure that we're getting that right. We're doing everything we can to be good partners with our community and our neighbors. We know that everything, no matter what we do, we probably will not be able to satisfy everyone all the time, but we want people to know that we are taking suggestions and comments seriously, and we're trying to be proactive through the design phase to be good neighbors. The architects have had several meetings with staff, both at the middle school and at the high school, getting feedback on learning spaces, athletic spaces, facility spaces in general. And so this has been a great experience to get lots of people involved in this process. At the high school, we're just at the early stages of that because we're really early in the planning stage. At the middle school, we've had several runs with staff getting feedback, especially in the science room areas and things along those lines. A couple of the highlights as it relates to the high school construction project is the stadium in the southeast corner will have be a multi-weather stadium with artificial turf in the middle, all-weather track around it, and then seating for 3,000 spectators on the west side of the stadium. The parking on the project, on the high school project, will accommodate approximately 1,000 cars. That's an increase of about 400, give or take, from where we're currently at. We think that's a good thing because what it does, it helps take pressure off of the side streets and we think makes us better neighbors. This plan is not the most up to date because this thing keeps changing as we go, but we may be looking at relocating tennis courts to make our parking work a little bit more efficiently and doing some things along those lines as well. We have some challenges with this project, but it will be a phenomenal project when it's done, something that the community definitely can rally behind it and be proud of. Next slide, please. So as we talked about earlier in the regular meeting, we have our 2016-2017 goals. You'll be able to find those on the district's website. The overarching themes as it relates to the 2016-17 goals is the advancement of HSD 2025 with an implementation plan. Really, it's taking the words on the wall and putting them into practice. It's really putting some meat behind it. It is a great project. Our learning services team have spearheaded that with the board's approval of that plan earlier this evening. We want to continue to connect with the community. We had a lot of success and a lot of positive feedback with community engagement through the pre-referendum process, and we don't think that just because people have voted yes and we have the money now that communication should stop. We want to continue to keep that communication open and also look at building on how do we get good two-way communication from all of our stakeholders and getting a good cross-section of what that looks like. Our investment in human capital, really as it relates to human resources, as the board looked to implement the teacher salary structure a year ago, we're 1 year into it. We have 2 more years to go. There is quite a time as we adopt and we adapt to that project. We're also, as part of that investment in human capital, we're looking at an administrative salary structure as well that will more align with the teaching salary structure and a performance pay system as well. And again, we're looking at a continuation of a previous year's goal that talks about the organizational alignment and a blueprint of how we're operating and how we can make sure we continue to operate in an efficient manner. The board policy project is really twofold. The first part of the project will hopefully be approved tonight after this meeting when we rejoin the regular board meeting, which is the renumbering of the board policies, going from a Hudson unique numbering series to a statewide accepted WASB numbering series. And that's been a project that our HR department has headed up. And so we'll start with that. That'll be phase 1. And then phase 2 is making sure that we are current on our board policies. We have some board policies that are not as current as we would like. And also making sure that we are getting those out and open to the public so that anybody can view them at any time. And we feel like we're increasing transparency that way. And then lastly, we have several projects happening in financial services. One obviously that deals with looking to build upon our 10-year facility plan for the 7 other buildings in the district, not including the high school. We feel the high school will be in pretty good shape when this project gets done, but there are 7 other buildings in the district that need work, and we'll be working with potentially a consultant to help us put together that plan. Not just district driven, but also looking at various stakeholder groups to get input, parents, kids, staff, to really look at, where are our needs, where are our wants, and what is our focus over the next 10 years when it comes to facilities. So that's kind of our direction as we head in to the next this current year, in 2016-17 school year, and we look forward to a great year. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ouellette. And now next up on the agenda is the district financial overview, and our treasurer, Lynn Robson, will present.
Thank you, Jamie. Good evening and welcome to the annual meeting of the Hudson Board of Education. My name is Lynn Robson and I'm the treasurer for the Hudson School Board. I would like to thank Tim Erickson and his team for their work in preparing this budget, but the work isn't limited to the financial services team. Creating the annual budget takes the work of the entire district team. From my fellow school board members, Superintendent Dr. Nick Ouellette, the district leadership team, principals, teachers, and support staff. It takes the work of everyone on the team to produce a budget that both supports the instructional needs and goals of the district while providing a high value to the taxpayer. And finally, thank you to the residents of the Hudson School District for the opportunity to speak with you briefly and for the support of the Hudson School District. As a parent of 2 girls in the Hudson School District, a community member, and a taxpayer, I, like all of you here, have a vested interest in the high quality of education we are providing to the students of Hudson and the value to the community through sound fiscal management practices. I can assure you that the Hudson School District continues to operate in a strong financial condition. One measure of the district's financial health is the district's total educational cost per member. In Hudson, this investment per member is $11,131. The state average is $12,574 per member, and the CISA average is $12,493 per member, as reported by the Department of Public Instruction. Hudson's mill rate in 2015-16 was $8.87, the 4th lowest of the 39 districts in CISA 11. By way of comparison, during that same time period, the surrounding schools of Baldwin, Woodville, Somerset, and St. Croix Central, and also New Richmond, all have mill rates between $10 and $12. Maintaining the Moody's AA bond rating is also a key indicator of the financial health of the district. This bond rating has helped the district with interest rate advantages in refinancing debt and keeping those costs as low as possible for our taxpayers. The AA1 bond rating reflects the district's growing tax base, strong cash reserves, and manageable debt levels. Additionally, the board has a policy of maintaining the general fund reserve balance between 25% and 30% of operating expenditures. It is because of this policy that the district has been able to cash flow operations throughout the year, despite the timing of state aid payments and property tax revenues, avoiding the need for costly cash flow borrowing. Regarding the budget and the levy, reflecting on the report of our superintendent, I believe we can be proud for the accomplishments of the Hudson School District, excited about our future, and proud that we are getting a high value for our tax dollars. The proposed budget represents key investment dollars to continue the implementation of the teacher salary structure, which was rolled out in 2015, which we believe will be a key to attracting and retaining the talent we have in this district. While enrollment has increased, we are expecting state aid to remain relatively flat. This translates directly into more reliance on the local levy to fund our schools. By way of comparison, Minnesota state aid is around 65%, whereas the Wisconsin state sources for the Hudson are funding at 43.82%. The levy represents an estimated $10 million below the maximum levy allowed by state law. This Board of Education is committed to ensuring we have a conservative budget, yet provide the necessary resources to support the curriculum and to allow our students to compete in a global economy. Our students are no longer competing for jobs and opportunities locally, but with children all around the world. Not only do great schools help our graduates, but great schools directly impact the quality of our community, the value of our homes, the desirability of our neighborhoods, and our community spirit, Go Raider Pride. As the treasurer of the Board of Education and chairperson of the Finance Committee, I stand behind the 2015-16 budget and annual plan. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Tim Erickson to come up and present the details of that budget for you.
Well, thank you, and good evening. Appreciate folks coming out tonight and committing some of their evening to finding out all the good things that are happening in the district, as well as looking at some of the financial pieces. Somebody once asked me, how do I make this stuff exciting? And I said, I don't know, and I still don't know. I still don't have an answer. So we'll try to get through it as painlessly as possible. You know, and just an FYI, up on the screen here, you'll see some of the presentation, the graphs up there essentially follow pages 7 through 17 and 23 through 25 plus the resolution. But everything else is in this book. And if you don't have a copy of this book, raise your hand, and Lois and Tammy in the back will bring one down for you if needed. So, so showing no hands, I guess everybody's got one. On the first page, of course, we've got the core vision and the Raider Way, which Dr. Ouellette touched on. You know, we look at our resources and we try to structure and align those with core vision and the Raider Way. I'm going to jump to page 3. Here, as Treasurer Robson mentioned, it takes a lot of people to put the budget together, and I also want to convey my thanks to all of the folks on these pages, the next couple of pages, plus our teachers and others that get involved with the budget process. The budget process starts in January and culminates in October. October, the board will take final action on the budget, and that's when we will find out what our state aids are, as well as our property valuations. So unfortunately, it's one of those things where we're 4 months into our fiscal year before we actually find out our final numbers. But that's we do our best to make projections on some of these things. Just a special thanks to Mark Cumlin and Lois Zeza in my office. They spend a lot of time putting this piece together as well. So I'm going to jump to page 6. Just a little bit of narrative about what's been happening in the district, and to update you, some of these pieces are referendum related as well. But we've got a number of initiatives that reinvest in our students, anywhere from Chromebooks all the way to major additions and renovations at the high school and middle school. The district's taken a lot of steps to ensure that taxpayer funds are being used wisely. For example, we've got a self-funded health insurance program, and we saved approximately $3.8 million over the last 3 years with that program. This coming year projected at a 0% increase. So again, we have a lot of stability with that program. We rolled out a new online fee payment system this year that's increased convenience for our customers. So for our parents, community ed folks, community members, and it streamlined our fee collection process. Bond proceeds from the referendum have been placed using investment strategies that safeguard principal, but yet provide an investment return that will generate between $800 and $1 million over the next 3 years, and those dollars will be used on the projects. We've started preliminary work to create a long-term facilities plan, as you've heard earlier. And so again, we look at bond rating. Those are things that really save the taxpayers a tremendous amount of money. And as Treasurer Robson mentioned, we've got an AA1 rating. Only 5 districts in the state and only 68 in the nation have a higher rating from Moody's. So anytime we go to refinance bonds, anytime we go to issue bonds, we're getting lower rates because of our strong financial position. We expect this year to under levy over $10.2 million. That under levy is a direct reduction of property taxes for all property owners in the district. And again, when we look towards the future, the district faces challenges. The amount of state funding the district receives fluctuates. Long-term funding levels are uncertain. those are things that are determined by the legislature on a biannual basis. For example, for this year's budget, we are looking at an increase in student membership of over 0.5%, but yet state equalization aid is projected to decrease by over 0.5% this year. So we have an inverse relationship, we have a structural issue, but again, those are things that we were able to address. But again, long-term funding is going to be pretty critical to all districts in the state. And again, as I mentioned, these are things, some of these major numbers don't come out from the state until 4 months into our fiscal year. Just run through the topics covered. We'll do an overview of the 2016-17 proposed budget and levy, impact on property taxes. We'll compare Hudson to other school districts, and then there'll be questions regarding the proposed budget and the levy. Page 8, I really hit on most of those things already, but again, there's information for you if needed. The budget challenges, again, looking at the funding levels from the state, those will continue to be challenges for us. Completing additions, renovations, the athletic fields and the athletic fields at the high school and the middle school safely, on time, and on budget. It's a challenge, and I think we're up to meeting that. Funding long-term maintenance and capital improvement plans for all facilities. Again, those are challenges that we're going to look at. We're going to need to look at the projects that are needed for our other buildings, as well as looking at how to fund those. We need to make sure that we don't fall into a major deferred maintenance, because many times over the long run, it's costly to fall in deferred maintenance situation. Again, a continued implementation of a competitive compensation structure to attract and retain our top talent. Getting the best teachers for our students here is really what it's all about. We want to maintain our high performing. We are a high performing district within the state of Wisconsin. We do deliver a great product to our students. Addressing instructional needs as far as professional development, curriculum adoption, resource materials, technology, so one-to-one devices for our students. We've got a great start on that. And then services to meet all of the different needs of students. Again, maintaining class size within class size guidelines. Again, another important piece. Going to page 10, the preliminary general budget and levy for 2016-2017. Looking at the major assumptions there, we've looked at, and I've talked about the equalization aid. That's one of our largest funding pieces, and how that's decreasing about 134,000 this year, and aid membership is increasing about a little over 0.5%. So the equalization aid is decreasing about 0.5%. We had a pupil categorical aid increase. That's an increase. Legislative increase over last year, so that's about 555,000. Again, the approximate under levy in this budget as it stands right now is 10.2 million. On the expenditure side, some of the highlights there: full implementation of our teacher salary structure. This is the first year of the full implementation, and we'll have 2 additional years beyond this. And then we have some board approved staffing that was put into place for this year, approved by the board. The health insurance, the self-funding, is actually a decrease over last year, a little over $300,000. And we have a partial restoration of district-wide projects. Back in 15-16, we cut dollars out of the budget in various areas. So this is a partial restoration, so that we can at least try to keep up a little bit on deferred maintenance. One-to-one Chromebooks implementation, that's a lease on Chromebooks. We were able to secure favorable leasing for those Chromebooks, and so that's an annual number, so $330,000. Purchase of residential properties at the high school. We purchased 2 residential properties, and that expands our footprint slightly, and will be helpful for us as we move forward in the addition and the renovations and the athletic fields on site. And then the last thing is a qualified school construction bond transfer of $100,000, and that is related to our 2010 addition at the middle school. We need to transfer dollars over to prepare for payment when those bonds come due. and those incidentally will drop off in 2019. So, and I won't read through all of these items here, but you can see, of course, under revenues, property taxes would go from 28.8 million to 31.2 million. Investment earnings would be level. Other local fees, activity fees, student fees, rental income that the district charges for outside activity or outside organizations to use the facilities are included. Our biggest one of our largest increases, 610, which is categorical aids. That's the pupil categorical aid increase. And then the equalization aid, of course, the second biggest piece of revenue for the general fund. And that's slated to go down again. Final numbers come out from the state in October. There's some other pieces of aid there. We anticipate federal sources of revenue, a fairly small portion of our budgeted revenues to go down slightly. A lot of the federal sources are based on free and reduced lunch counts. The good news is our counts are relatively low here in the Hudson School District, and so I guess the bad thing is we don't receive a lot of federal aid compared to a lot of other districts, but again, it's good to have the counts a little lower. If we look under the expenditure side, as I mentioned, this includes the teacher salary structure, wage increases. So they're 2.45% year to year. And then if we go down the list, other purchase services, those are payments essentially to contractors, to vendors that provide services to the district. And that would also include our $150,000, which is our partial restoration to district-wide projects. The non-capital objects are mainly consumable supplies and any equipment purchases that are under $3,000. Our capital objects, line 500, again, that increase is going to be largely due to, under those top expenditure summaries, the purchase of the residential properties and then the Chromebooks implementation. So that's about $700,000 there. And then we've got transfer to special education. Those are for special education funds. And then the transfer to debt service for the qualified school construction bond. So when you look at total general fund expenditures, they're up about 4.62%. Then the property purchases will come from fund balance, the board designated construction funds for one of those purposes, and those dollars will come out of that fund balance. So if you look at net general fund expenditures, we've got an increase of 3.98%. So gives us a deficit at this point of about $500,000. So it's a plan to spend down a fund balance. And if we go to the next page, on page 11, we'll get to a little bit of a summary on the fund balance and what that looks like. But we've got under the first section, we've got the general fund debt service and the general fund levy. So when we look at debt service levy on the new referendum debt, that's going to come in for this year. So that's $3,065,000. And then the existing debt service for this year is $3.7 million. And then we've got the general fund levy of $31 million. So 17.64% total increase. When we look at the fund balance summary as of June 30th, we have a $16.6 million unassigned fund balance, and that's 29.48% of the general fund. Board policy has been set at 25 to 30%. As Treasurer Robson had mentioned, these are things that give us a financial strength that bond ratings agencies are looking for, and it gives us a lower borrowing costs, and also eliminates the need for us to cash flow borrow for operations, which saves a considerable amount of money. The planned spend down of $500,000 brings the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures to 27%, so within fund balance policy. And then we have the board committed fund balance for capital projects. As I mentioned, the high school property purchases will come out of there. And then as we go through the construction process, the board is also committed up to $3.5 million additional out of that fund. So if all 3.5 are used as we get through the process, the construction process, that fund balance will be reduced down to about little less than $250,000. If I go to page 12, page 12 tells a little bit of a story about how our general fund expenditures have compared to the consumer price index over the past few years. So starting in 2010, 2011, you can see along that chart the different consumer price index levels as they were for those years. And then you can see where the district spending was. So you can see that dotted line, it represents district spending, and that has, for most years, has been substantially under where the consumer price index would be. And so if you look at our average annual growth in the budget expenditures from 10-11 to 2015-16, it's 2.89%. Another chart on page 13, and it talks a little bit, what we did was looked at what's the cumulative effect of being under that consumer price index, and what's that cumulative savings for taxpayers. So if you take all the way, again, that same time period and include the 2016-2017 budget, the cumulative effect of those savings are just under $10.5 million. Page 14 gives a history from 96 through 97 of student aid membership. Student aid membership is slightly different from what we do as a head count, although there are a lot of similarities. We officially report to the state what our student counts are in September, so the third Friday in September, which is coming up here, and then the second Friday in January. We also pull in, what's different is we provide summer school, so we also pull in full-time equivalency counts for students that attend summer school, so those get added into our aid membership units as well. On the next page, it gives a summary of what our revenues look like, what the breakdown is. As I mentioned, our federal sources are a relatively small slice of the pie. So in 15-16, they amounted to just over 0.5% of our total revenues. State sources were at just over 45%. Local sources, just over 53%. One of the things that we've seen change here over the past few years is that normally these float between 50-50, sometimes 49-51 when I look at state and local shares. So the revenues generally float about even on the average over the long term, but we've seen some changes structurally over the past few years. In the 16-17 proposed budget, state sources will comprise just under 44%. Local sources about 55%. So again, the state aid formula sometimes, some years works against the district, and it's primarily due to our high property values. When we see property values rise up substantially compared to state average, the district winds up in a negative aid situation. So what happens is in the state formula, they say Hudson taxpayers can afford to pay more, and so they take the aid away and redistribute it to other districts. So that's what we deal with some years. Page 16 talks a little bit about, in theory, how property taxes work and how they're spread across different properties. So the first example is a no change. So there'd be no change in school district levy. We try to break this down and try to make it easy to understand. If we have a property, 2015 assessed value was $100,000. The 2016 assessed value went up by $10,000, so $110,000. So both of those properties went up by the same amount, had the same valuation, went up by the same amount. So in essence, each resident still owns 50% of the total property value in the school district, and each resident's share of the levy remains the same, even though the assessed values went up. So they'd each still be taxed at $1,500 per residence. Example 2 pulls an example, and so we look at what happens if there's new construction. So again, this one, we leave the assessed values the same, just for ease of presentation. And we look at the 2016, we have new construction coming on of $100,000. So in the 2015 year, the school district levy was $1,500 per resident. And 2016, what happens is the new construction comes on, adds to the tax base, and even though the levy remained the same, the tax per residence is $1,000. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of what happens when we have different assessments, different valuations that occur, and what happens when new construction comes on. Page 17 is a historical valuation, property valuation in the district, all the way back to 93, 94, and running up through where we're projecting that valuation to be for 2016, 2017. When we look at these numbers, it's important to remember on your tax statement, you've got different credits on that tax statement. So one of the largest credits is the school levy tax credit. There's also a first dollar credit and a lottery credit. And these mill rates are figured prior to any of that reduction. So those reductions come on after this. The townships, et cetera, I believe they receive the information from the state on that school levy tax credit in December, so they will make adjustments to the tax bill. But it's important to remember that these are gross numbers, and what you'll get when you get your bill will be net. In 16-17, we're projecting that the property valuation will go up about 5.55%, and then the total levy, as we talked about before, and the percentage change gives us a mill rate of 9.89. So we're up $1.02 in the mill rate. And again, part of that's due to general fund operations of the district. And then also part of that's due to debt service for the referendum. So what we talked about during a referendum is that we talked about a 90-cent impact to the mill rate for the new debt service that would be coming on. We also talked about additional operational costs, which would add about another 15 cents. So in total, we were talking about $1.05. Now we've got an additional segment of bond issuance, possibly another $10 million. We didn't issue the full amount because we wanted to see what budgets are looking like. We may not need to issue the full $10 million. But we will need a little more time before we know that for sure. But that additional piece of $10 million in bonding would add another 10 cents. So right now we're at 80 cents for the new debt service, and so we're tracking well. The additional 10 million would add, as it's structured, would add approximately another 10 cents onto the mill rate. So we'd be at that 90 cents. So in essence, when you add those up, we're looking at $1.05 impact, and that was not including the general fund. We're at $1.02 all in, so in a good spot for sure. When you look at estimating the estimated equalization values and the levy by taxing district, you can see that each one of those values and how those are going up in each one of the taxing districts. So the city, the townships, and the village. The town of St. Joe is the one outlier on that one, going up about 13%. And they were up about 13% last year, I believe. So there's some strong valuation growth in the town of St. Joe. That always is a little bit of an issue for those townships that are outliers. If they're going up much faster than the others, essentially they wind up shouldering a little more of the tax apportionment that happens when we go to spread that tax levy out amongst the taxing districts. But the others are fairly all in line in that, anywhere from the 4.4 on up to 5.2. So, but again, town of St. Joe will kind of takes the takes the prize at the over 13%. Page 18, I won't spend a lot of time on. This is presented, these numbers on page 18. Our general fund expenditures are presented, same numbers as you've seen before, they're just presented by function, so presented a little bit differently. And then on page 19, we've got the other funds that comprise all of the district funds, so special projects funds, which are special education and donations and grants. The debt service fund, and of course you see the numbers jumping around under the budget in 16-17 because of that issuance of bonding for the referendum projects. And then the capital projects fund, that will hold the construction costs for those projects, and that's a very, very rough estimate. That is going to be cumulative over the next few years as we look at that fund. Food service, community service, and package and cooperative programming funds. Those are funds that do not use property tax funding. They're primarily fee-based and they're standalone programs. Those funds are restricted to those programs as well as their fund balances. With that, again, I won't get into a lot more detail unless people have questions. On page 20 is the balance sheet. For people that are into looking at financial statements, this is a very highly summarized piece of our balance sheet, and it's a snapshot, essentially a snapshot on June 30th. So it does show our cash and investments at that point in time. Receivables and prepaid expenses, those are taxes, primarily taxes that have not been collected yet from the local taxing entities. But they'd fall into the 15-16 fiscal year, so they're counted as a receivable. And then you can see the fund balance down below. We've got the self-funded insurance, which we went to self-funding for health insurance and dental insurance 3 years ago. We also created a reserve. Like an insurance company, we need to have a reserve out there to stabilize any spikes in claims as we go along. So far, we have not experienced any large spikes. Things have been very, very stable for us. And then you can see the secondary space for learning, those capital and project improvement funds that will be used, and then the unassigned fund balance. On page 21, we have long-term debt sections. So essentially, those are voter-approved bonds. And you can see about the kind of down towards the three sections up from there. You can see the general obligation bonds issued for the referendum. So 72 million, and the interest rates are anywhere from the 2% to 5%, averaging out I think a little over 2. It was two between just under 3%. So that kind of gives you a breakdown, gives you an idea of what our debt looks like, and we do have a fair amount of debt that is falling off, that is going to be maturing over the next few years. When we get into other information, page 23. Page 23 looks at total revenue and total educational costs per member. These are for K-12 districts in the state. And again, Treasurer Robson mentioned, when we look at total educational costs, it's $11,131. For Hudson, the state average is $12,574, and the CESA average is about $12,500. So if we had the average, it would generate anywhere between $8 and $9 million additional if we just did the average. So again, a lot of this is due to that underlevy that we talk about. Our total educational cost rank is 50th lowest of 367 districts. The next page, page 24, looks at our cooperative service agency number 11. Those comprise of those 39 districts in our region. And again, Lynn mentioned the mill rates of many of our neighboring districts. So those neighboring districts are all running above $10 and $11 on their mill rate. And so Hudson is the fourth lowest, and there's a little correction there in your book. I think we had 36th lowest out of 39, but it's fourth lowest out of 39 districts. The underlevy on page 25, talking about direct tax relief, this looks historically at our underlevy, which started back in 2003, 2004 at a very, very small amount, and has annually grown. So when we look at that span of 13 years, we've underlevied $96.5 million. Coincidentally, we bonded for $90.4 million for the referendum projects. But that's a coincidence, and pretty interesting when you look at that. That's not something that any other district in the state does. In fact, if we look at the next page, on page 26, the 15-16 data, which is the data that's available for underlevies, and we look at this statewide, last year we had underlevied $12.8 million. The next highest district was Rice Lake at $5.3 million. So Rice Lake is between 2,500 and 3,000 students, and we're about 5,600 students. So you can get a little bit of perspective there. We are generally the number one underlevier in the state. In fact, this comprises about 30%. Hudson comprises about 30% of the total state underlevy when you look at all those underlevies. And then we get to the last page, which is the proposed resolution for tonight. And that resolution reads that a tax in total amount of $38,069,413, which is split between the general fund, $31,245,989, and then debt service for $6,823,424, be levied against taxable property in the Hudson School District. And then the last few pages are glossary, so if you have insomnia at night, just go ahead and open that up and start reading. I'm sure it'll cure it. So, but thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. All right, now at this stage of the meeting, this is an opportunity for all members of the public, board members included, to be able to comment on the budget and then ask questions and so forth. There's a lot of information there. We try to present it in this similar format to the previous year, so some of these numbers change a little bit, but we've been continuing to rank near the bottom of our CISA group as far as the cost per student or the revenue per student. So anyway, is there any questions from the community or comments? And again, I offer it up to anyone in the room, including board members, if there's any questions that would be presented at this time before we adopt the levy.
Mr. President?
Yes, Carrie.
Tim, you prefaced your remarks by saying you didn't know how to make that exciting, but I don't often disagree with you, but I found it thrilling, so thank you. On page 24 of the three school districts who were lower than we were, I don't see them listed on page 26. Were they also underlevied?
So page 24 are your mill rates, and so what we have on 26, we're only giving the top 22 districts, and so that underlevy, when you look at that, it's only those top 22. There are other districts that underlevy less than, say, Sun Prairie, but
So they may be included, but it's a
they
low
could,
amount. It's not
they
comparable
might be.
to.
Yeah,
Okay.
they could be. I'm not sure. We could find out the answer to that, though. We can find out.
Thank you.
With that question on the underlevy, I know that we've been as much as 13 million underlevy. This figure is for last year, 2015-16.
Right.
12.8, and you're projecting for, under this new budget, for it to be about 10.2.
10.2, yeah, maybe give or take, once we get the final aid number in from the state.
And that's even after an additional roughly 3.2 million in debt service that we didn't
That's
have the
correct.
previous year.
That's correct.
I noticed that on those other districts that are under levied, Madison School District had been number 2, I think, to us the previous year. They've completely slipped out of the top 22.
Yes, they have fallen off the map, and they're a district of over 20,000 students, and they, I think one time they under-levied more than we did. If you look at Sun Prairie, number 22, they're slightly bigger than we are. I think they're maybe around 6,500 or 7,000 students. So $253,000 of under levy there. So we take the cake.
I think this under levy is just a concept that a lot of people, they get their tax bill and they don't understand, where this under levy comes from. But if you have lived in any other school, or not any other, but at least 300 other school districts in the state are in a situation where they're not under levying, they're at their max, and instead of setting the levy, which is what we're going to be, trying to do here tonight with this annual meeting, they always have to set it at the max, and then it's a matter of what teachers do we cut and what programs do we cut to get there.
That's very true. We're in a enviable position if other districts look at where we are, for sure.
All right. Any other comments, Rob?
Yeah, no, I know that we ran a $500,000 surplus, and as such, we were able to refund roughly $150,000 to the deferred maintenance budget. Is that right?
Yeah, we reinstituted about 150 back into capital projects based on, that was one of our areas of reduction last year with the reductions in state aid. So we did reinstitute 150. It's certainly not exactly where we want it to be, but it's a start.
Yeah, for sure. And, kudos to the district leadership on building goals around that deferred maintenance plan, that long-term 10-year plan. I know last year at this time we talked about, and I remember right, Sandy brought up the desire of the community to reinvest in what we've already paid for. We're doing a great job with the high school, doing some nice things with the middle school. But we also have a number of elementary schools that we need to invest in to make sure that we have, maintain our assets. I was talking with a lady in our community who's on a fixed budget, and she was telling me about how when she was growing up on the farm, that if her family didn't take care of their assets, they wouldn't take care of them. And she's like, whatever you do, just make sure you take care of what we've already paid for. So kudos to the district and now the leadership for building that plan.
Mr. President.
Yes, Lynn.
Tim, can you help refresh my memory? I'm looking on the balance sheet on page 20 of our booklet. Can you please refresh my memory on what the non-spendable dollars are for one? I think it had something to do with fixed assets or something.
Yeah, when we're required to break that down under governmental accounting standards, and so the non-spendable fund balance are things like inventory. They're like inventory assets.
Okay.
And so they're consumables, but they're not liquid.
Thanks, Tim.
Sure.
And as far as, we're going to be entertaining a motion, a resolution for adoption of the levy. Again, the levy does get voted on here, but it doesn't get finalized until we know exactly what the state aid is, and that doesn't happen for another 2 months.
Yep.
Or not 2 months, but until later next month.
Yeah, you'll adopt later October.
But with this increase in the levy, we had been saying pre-referendum that it was going to be, 95, 97 cents right in there, and we're holding that to about $1 or $2, and that was that 97 cents just for the debt service part of it. So even with the increase, and if all the other districts froze their mill rates, instead of being fourth lowest in the district, we're still going to be in the bottom quartile of the CSA, even with the dollar increase.
Yeah, that's right. We're still going to be in that bottom, the bottom few.
Any other questions or observations? Open it up again to the community members, folks out in the audience. Anyone here can make a comment or have a question for Tim or anyone here. Hearing none, then I would move on to adoption of the levy and would call for a motion. Doesn't have to be a board member, but anyone is welcome to phrase the resolution, the motion in the form of the resolution on page 27, which I think we have up on the screen. So,
Mr. President,
yes.
be it resolved that a tax in the total amount of $38,069,413, of which $31,245,989 for general fund and $6,823,424 for the debt service fund be and is hereby levied against the taxable property in the Hudson School District for school purposes.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, and this is where we call for a voice vote of all those present. All those in favor of adopting the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Hearing no nays, I rule that the ayes have it and the levy has been adopted per statutory guidelines. Now we move on to new business. There's actually two items of new business. One is to set the date for the next annual meeting, and the other is any other annual meeting powers. I guess at this point, Shana, since you're our school attorney and parliamentarian, can you give us examples of other annual meeting powers that could be exercised at this time?
Absolutely. Most of the annual meeting powers are set forth in Wisconsin Statute 120 sub 10, so 12010, and examples of other annual meeting powers include the purchasing of, or the authorization of the purchasing of textbooks, the salaries of board members, taxes for sites, buildings, and maintenance, and other types of mostly financial issues that the electors would authorize the school board to take on at a later date.
Did you say salaries of board members are included?
I
in
did
it?
say salaries of board members.
All right. All right. Is there, at this time, I'd entertain a motion then. First agenda item under new business is setting the date for 2017 annual meeting. Is there a motion?
President?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we set the date for the 2017 annual meeting for Monday, September 11 at 7 p.m. 2017.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Given that we usually do this on the second Monday of September, always want to have it after Labor Day. Pardon?
Typically do it on the second Tuesday, and we've changed it to Monday to coincide with our new board format.
All right. So, yeah, tonight is on a Tuesday because a year ago at this time we were always meeting on Tuesdays. So the Monday change is still the second week of the month after Labor Day. It's just moving from a Tuesday to a Monday. Thanks for commenting on that, Nick, and catching that. All those in favor of adopting the new meeting date for next year, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. And then at this time would be the time for any other annual meeting powers.
Jamie, was there a second on that last?
Oh, yes. Who seconded the,
Okay, thank you. I
yeah,
just-
Sandy. I thought I had her a second, so. All right.
Mr. Johnson,
Okay, all right. Well, now, yeah, yes, Bruce.
did you check the schedule? I mean, do the Packers play on the 11th next year? Did you check that by chance?
No, the NFL doesn't put that out until late April, early May, so.
How can we be setting it?
Actually, it's early April. It's before the draft. I think they set the schedule. But, yeah, if we have to, we'll call another annual meeting of the electors to get that done. All right. I'll make one more call for any other motions to come before the body, annual meeting powers, like setting school board salaries or anything like that? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion for adjournment of the annual meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment of the 2016 annual meeting of the Hudson School District, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we are adjourned. And at this time, I'm going to recall the regular meeting and pick up our agenda.